Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I rise today with my colleague from Alabama, Senator Jones, to urge our colleagues' support for our amendment to the National Defense Authorization Act. It would repeal the Survivor Benefit Plan and Dependency Indemnity Compensation Offset, more commonly known as the Military Widow's Tax. This unfair offset is currently preventing as many as 65,000 surviving military spouses, more than 260 of them in the state of Maine, from receiving the full benefits they deserve. Mr. President, the Defense Department's Survivors Benefits Plan, or SBP, is primarily an insurance benefit that military families purchase in their retirement. It provides cash benefits to a surviving spouse or other eligible recipients when a retiree passes away. On the other hand, the Department of Veterans Affairs Dependency and Indemnity Compensation, known as DIC, is a monthly tax-free payment to survivors and dependents of service members who pass away from service-related conditions. For example, if a military retiree pays premiums into the SBP insurance program, then his or her spouse ought to be able to receive those benefits when the retiree passes away. What we find instead, however, is that surviving spouses receiving these insurance payments have a dollar-for-dollar offset for the separate payments that they are receiving from the VA. In some cases, this leads to the total elimination of the Survivors Benefits Plan benefit. In other cases, the offset greatly reduces the benefit. In either case, Mr. President, it is out and out unfair and harms the survivors of our service members and military retirees. The average offset amounts to about $925 per month, which is often a significant amount of money that a widow or a widower needs to help support their families or themselves in the absence of their spouses. Mr. President, military commanders often say that you recruit the soldier, but you retain the family. We have an obligation to make sure that we are taking care of our military families who sacrifice so much for our country. Our amendment has the support of numerous military and veterans advocacy groups, including the Gold Star Wives of America, the Military Officers Association of America, the National Military Family Association, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, and the VFW, among others. More than 75 senators, 3/4 of the members of this chamber, and 340 members of the House of Representatives support the effort that Senator Jones and I have led by co-sponsoring our standalone bill. In fact, this legislation has been adopted by the Senate in the past numerous times, always by an overwhelming margin or by a voice vote, only to be later stripped out in the conference process. This problem goes back decades, but this year we can finally solve it once and for all. It is time for us to do our duty, not only to support the brave men and women who serve in our military, but also to support their families. I encourage each of our colleagues to join in this bipartisan effort and support the repeal of the military widows tax as part of the NDAA. Thank you, Mr. President.
Mr. President.
I can't find.
You need to yield.
Oh, the senator from Alabama. I'm sorry.
I'm over here on the right side. You're not used to looking over that way. Mr. President, I want to echo what my colleague and friend, Senator from Maine, has said about the elimination of the widow's tax, and rise today to urge this body to bring the Military Widows Tax Elimination Act of 2019 to the Senate floor for a vote this week as an amendment to the NDAA. I introduced this bipartisan legislation with my friend and colleague, Senator Collins, this year. It has been introduced numerous times. Legislation which is designed to right a terrible wrong has been introduced numerous times over the last 18 years, but without success. Today, we are at an all-time high for co-sponsorship. 75 members of this body, Republicans and Democrats, all support this legislation and have signed on as co-sponsors. The only other major bill with support in this Congress like that was the one that we recently passed by unanimous consent to crack down on robocalls, which I know is something that we can all agree needed to be done. But just like that, this legislation is needed as well. A military widows tax bill has earned overwhelming support on both sides of the aisle, as Senator Collins talked about, from groups like TAPS, the Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, the Military Officers Association of America, the VFW. Support out there is overwhelming because it is simply the right thing to do. This law currently prohibits military widows from receiving their full survivor benefits from both the VA and the additional Department of Defense survivor benefits plan that they paid into voluntarily. These Gold Star families, and as many as I think 65,000 across the country and as many as 2,000 in my home state of Alabama, are being ripped off. It's just that plain and simple. To add insult to injury, they are being ripped off by the very United States government that their loved ones swore to protect. That is absolutely shameful, Mr. President, that we would treat our military families in such a way. We obviously can never repay these families for their loss and the sacrifices that they have made. But it is our duty, I submit, our duty to try and to do all that we can. And we can dang sure stop the government from robbing them of the benefits that they have paid for and earned. At the end of the day, this is a cost of war. It's a cost of freedom, more importantly. It's a cost of freedom, Mr. President. So for folks to say this fix is too expensive or that there's not an obvious pay for in our budgets that we have today, I would remind my colleagues that this bill has been made it into the NDAA several times before. And this body has waived the pay-go rules for it several times in the past because members of this body have recognized that there are more important issues at play here. Many of my colleagues have supported this bill without a pay-for in the past. This week, we'll be considering the NDAA. And I'm very grateful to Senator Inhofe and the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, who is responsible for shepherding this defense authorization on the floor this week. The work that the committee, of which I'm a member, has done just incredible bipartisan work to get this NDAA to the floor this week. Senator Inhofe is a co-sponsor of this bill. And in 2008, when the bill came to the floor of the Senate as an NDAA amendment earlier, also without a pay-for, he noted that an effort to eliminate the widow's tax had been in the works for 8 years at that point, since 2000. He urged his colleagues to right this wrong. He spoke on the floor stating, "It is time we give back these benefits to those families of those who have served bravely in defense of our nation. I think it is an insult to their honor and their memory to do anything else. I couldn't agree more. And I hope that our colleagues today will too, and will continue their support for our veterans and widows, and work with our leaders to ensure that this amendment gets a vote during the NDAA deliberations. This is our chance to right this wrong once and for all. This is not a partisan issue. It is an issue of common ground and, significantly, of common purpose. That is precisely why 75 members of this body have signed on as co-sponsors, to say that it is their fundamental belief that we should honor our promise to the families of the best and bravest among us who have given their lives in service to our nation. I want to thank my Republican colleague, Senator Collins of Maine, for her leadership on this important issue and for being a great partner in the fight to finally get this legislation passed once and for all. And like she did a few moments ago, I want to urge all of the rest of my colleagues in this body to call for this amendment to be brought to the floor for a vote this week as an amendment to the NDAA. Let our votes speak louder than our words. Let's finally right this wrong. Mr. President, thank you. I yield the floor.